Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of The Real and the Rare. My name is Scott Morgan-Roth, the Motor City Madmouth, along with...
the X-Factor, Xavier McKnight.
There you go, Big X. Good to have you back on the network. Good to have you back on the program. And what are you delivering in the kitchen?
Well, Scott, before we get to what we're going to be dishing out in the kitchen tonight, it's only appropriate that we begin tonight's show simply by saying that we hope that all of our listeners and everyone out there is well and they are staying home. They are practicing good social distancing and they're not overly stressing out during this very unpredictable time, not only in our country but in our world, known as the coronavirus, known as COVID-19. And we just hope that in the next hour we can hopefully provide some relief from the reality that everybody is going through during this time with our show.
Okay, well, I'll let you lead the way. Go for it.
Well, Monday morning was a very pleasant surprise. I have not seen an NFL offseason like this in many, many, many years. I've seen many NBA offseasons like this in the past few years, but Monday morning we woke up to a very, very pleasant surprise from the NFL, who, they're not in action right now on the field, but for us not to actively have sports going on right now, Scott, you got to hand it off to the NFL. They absolutely showed out this week.
Yeah, well,
let's begin. Well, go ahead.
That's fine. Well, the only thing I can tell you from our standpoint is that, in the business of online publication, the NFL has provided our sold content all week, that's for sure. So, with all due respect, I got to tell you that we're thankful for them and everything else is shut down. But, that's the world we live in. And, tell me what it's been like for you up in the Sarasota area in terms of the quarantine. And are you actually being forced to quarantine, or how is your station reacting?
We are not exactly being forced to quarantine just of yet. However, this week we did start a transition of many of us starting to work from home on many days out of the week. I was one of the first people who was told, hey, you're going to be working from home. So that started for me officially on Wednesday. It honestly was no different. Honestly, I quite enjoyed the transition. And I love being at the station, but I understand right now is just not the time to be out and about and in the public and interacting with people in a face-to-face type of way. So I enjoy the fact that I'm blessed enough to be able to be in a position to have a job that I can work from home, still do what I do very well, and continue to provide content to the great people of this community.
Well, that's what you've got to do. I mean, I've been watching lots of different sports shows throughout the week, and, from Get Up to, First Take and Golic and Wingo. Yeah, all these guys are forced to do things on location for sure. But unfortunately, that's the situation we're dealing with at the moment. So it's hard to believe but that's the world we're dealing with at the moment. So what else can you do? But you're right.
Definitely, for sure. And, I believe that this time of isolation is actually healthy for many of us. The only unfortunate part in all of this is that there are people who are being misplaced and there are people who are losing their livelihood right now as a result of what is going on with our world and our stock market and the unpredictability of this virus.
Yeah, isn't it unpredictable or what? My goodness. That's just unbelievable. We actually flew back from Phoenix, Arizona last Sunday night and Saturday night, Sunday, and luckily we take the red eye. I don't know, when you fly, I don't know about you, but I like to take the red eye flights, is what I do. So we didn't have as many people on the plane, but even when we got in town, you could see the masks very visible at the airports and so forth. And as a result, it's you're certainly awake. And if I take any trips in the coming months, then what will end up happening is I'll be taking them by automobile.
Yes.
That's so. So tell me what it's like for you to work remotely. What are you able to do remotely that helps the station out?
Well, I'm mainly able to do digital content, writing up articles, keeping the social media updated, any important streams, meaning basically within the past 2 weeks, it's been any press conference that the president or the vice president does, or any press conference that our governor here in Florida does, or any local conferences that are happening as well. We stream those. We took those live on our social media platforms, as well as our other platforms as well, television and online. But that's mainly it for me.
Okay.
And, that's why I said it's a blessing to be able to just be in a position to have this type of job where I am allowed to work from home and do everything that I am just about able to do when I'm at the station anyway.
Yeah, luckily I'm in a building, Xavier, which is, if you want to call this like barracks. I mean, this thing is built so sound, where our studio is all the way in the very back, so you don't really run across too many people here at all, that's for sure. So, and our studio here in Coral Springs is only about 12 minutes away from my house, so I like coming to this environment because that's where all of our equipment is, and it's a good place to do it. But in a case like yours, where you'll probably go ahead and deal with a lot of people, I don't have to deal with anybody except the few that come in here from time to time. But you're right. But I guess the big message of the night is for all you folks out there, do whatever you got to do to maintain social distancing and stay safe. So, with that said, why don't we talk about the business at hand? The ball's on you.
All right, well, let's talk about what we woke up to on Monday morning. What we woke up to mainly were many notable players in the league being tagged. Derrick Henry was definitely among those most notable, but the surprising one to most people had to be the Dallas Cowboys tagging Dak Prescott. He has not agreed to sign that tag yet. But here's one that actually caught me by surprise, Scott, and that would be A.J. Green of the Cincinnati Bengals. Just how last season went, him being injured all season, but part of me really just feels like he wants a fresh start, and he doesn't necessarily want to be there anymore. So he's one that I'm watching out for, too, to see if he's going to sign his franchise tag. But one of the other bigger shocking things to me was Kirk Cousins getting a revised contract that's now giving him more tenure to stay with the Minnesota Vikings. And, I understand that he had a good season for them last year. I understand he took them back to the playoffs. But they lost a lot of players in the process of revising this deal this week that now has me looking at the Minnesota Vikings like, how much of a step back is this team going to take? Let me give you some of the names that will no longer be on the Minnesota Vikings going into next year.
Okay.
Mackenzie Alexander, Trey Waynes, Xavier Rhodes, Stephon Diggs, Linval Joseph, Everson Griffin. I just named you many key players a part of a team that was one game short of going to a Super Bowl a year ago. So now what you're doing is you're eliminating players who are part of the fabric and the culture that are the Minnesota Vikings of what they are today. Scott, what are your thoughts on just what you expect to see from the Minnesota Vikings when and if the 2020 NFL season does indeed start?
Well, I mean, losing Stephon Diggs, to me, is a huge takes a problem for him, because the way I look at Diggs, he's a playmaker, and Buffalo needed him. So I think the Buffalo Bills probably gave up a lot of draft capital to do it. But, I think the Buffalo Bills needed to surround Josh Allen with a great playmaker, and I think the Buffalo Bills could be really scary out there in the AFC East. And I know we'll get into it later on, of course, but, you lose a lot of good players, then there's obviously a situation where you're going to regress, and then you also wonder about the rest of the division. I don't know how many, you have to look at the division in general, Xavier. Did Chicago get better? Did Minnesota regress? Did the Lions make any good moves? And you have to understand the X factor with the Lions is Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia are on a win or else. So there's a lot of pressure for those fellows to keep their jobs. So, I don't think that when you have so many players on that team where you're that close to doing real well, and all of a sudden you lose a lot. I mean, let's face it, we both know that it takes 40 to 50% turnover, in the NFL year in and year out. But my God, when you go from worst to first, you can understand where the roster turnover is. In some cases, you have coaching changes. So, Kirk Cousins has certainly got some more security in Minnesota. They certainly believe in the guy. But how much can he do with a limited deck? So I think Diggs alone, and as well as the other fellows that you mentioned, are certainly going to be worth a couple losses more. So do they go? I don't know, what was their record last year? Do you remember?
Not off the top of my head, I do not.
It doesn't matter. If they end up winning 9 games, then that means, come playoff time, if they get in, then they're going to be on the road. They're not going to gain home field advantage. And you know what happens in the NFL? You can use it, especially on the new collective bargaining agreement where only one team gets a bye. So a lot of things you have to factor into the equation. So I think it could be a rough year for the Vikings, I really do, to answer your question.
Yes, and I agree with that sentiment as well, because the only team that I honestly see in their division that is going to be better than them right now, I would have to say, are the Green Bay Packers. I'm interested in seeing how Chicago is going to look after acquiring Nick Foles from the Jacksonville Jaguars earlier this week, who are clearly going back into another full rebuild mode, but we'll touch on that a little later as well. I'm not worried about the Detroit Lions. I'm sorry, Scott. I'm just not worried about them. I know that that's your team,
right?
But I have no faith in Matt Patricia. I have no faith in Bob Quinn. Here's what I see Matt Patricia doing more of than anything. He's bringing leftover players from the Patriots over who Bill Belichick just isn't interested in having a part of the culture anymore.
Right.
Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to equate to Detroit now all of a sudden developing a winning culture because of players who are coming over from the Patriot way. Last time I checked, Matt Patricia was not Bill Belichick, and he did not have that type of resume. He doesn't have that type of itinerary. It's not going to equate to the same results in the Motor City as it did in Foxborough.
Right. Well, bear in mind, Darius Slay got traded to the Eagles, and he came out firing with Matt Patricia. When I read some of the things that he mentioned, Matt Patricia, to me, I don't have any faith in them at all. I think that he's looking at his last year. I can't, they're under a winner or else mandate by Mrs. Ford. They are. So Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia are right now desperate to go ahead and get enough wins on the board. You're talking about a team where Jim Caldwell guided this team to 9-7 years, and he was able to get the team into the playoffs, and they were talking Super Bowl when they brought these guys in, and as a result, right now the Super Bowl looks more like where the Lions are headed. So, but I think the Lions I personally think the Lions may only be good for 6 wins next year, and that will not be enough to save these guys. They'll go as far as they can with Matthew Stafford, and I pray that they don't bring on Tua. God, that would be such another catastrophic mistake. So, but it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next several weeks. For sure.
They definitely will, but now I want to touch a little on the Tennessee Titans and
sure.
franchise tagging Derrick Henry, but signing Ryan Tannehill to a long-term deal with the organization. Do you believe they got this move right? And the reason I'm asking that is because we understand that the running back position is one of those that, especially after the injury that happened with Todd Gurley a little over 2 years ago, after signing that huge contract extension with the Rams. Now, obviously, he's been released from them, and we're going to touch on that as well. But Derrick Henry practically carried the Tennessee Titans to the AFC Championship. Not to take anything away from Ryan Tannehill and how he was able to come in there and help change the culture once they were able to put him in there in place of Marcus Mariota, and the team was able to go on a roll and clinch a playoff spot
Well, you do have to lock up Henry, or you have to keep him in the fold for a while. I'm not in favor of giving running backs a little more security, but you still have to keep them around. I think the thing that worries me more was the fact they let Jack Conklin get away to the Cleveland Browns, because, again, you don't want to lose quality linemen, especially a guy like him. And as far as Ryan Tannehill, I really, truly thought that Tom Brady should have landed in Tennessee. I really thought that was a potentially good fit with Mike Vrabel, but I know we'll talk about Brady in a little while. But, boy, did Brady land in a good spot with Bruce Arians. So, Ryan Tannehill got hot. He was the beneficiary of a fresh start. So, yeah, I think, I'm a little skeptical about Ryan Tannehill because of his injury problems in the past, too. So I'm a little nervous about that. But you had to reward the guy for what he had done to get him into the postseason, and the fact that they were fairly close to making it to the Super Bowl. So I have mixed feelings there.
But I'm glad you brought up the Jack Conklin point, because that's exactly where I was going with this. Because what it looked like to me was going on was they tagged Derrick Henry. They wanted to get Ryan Tannehill re-signed, but I know that they had to make some type of push to try to keep Jack Conklin in the fold. The Cleveland Browns just offered him more, and it could potentially possibly be a better opportunity there. That remains to be seen, because when it comes to the Cleveland Browns, they're just a world of unpredictability that we just don't know about right now. But before I touch on the Houston Texans situation that occurred on Monday, let's talk about another team in the AFC South that made a huge splash earlier this week.
Okay.
I'm not talking about signing an over-the-hill Phillip Rivers. I'm talking about the Indianapolis Colts trading for DeForest Buckner from the San Francisco 49ers. That is one of those potential lookout type of moves to me, because he's one of the better interior defensive linemen that we have in the game today. And I believe San Francisco could really be hurt from this going into next year. Maybe not, because of all those great players that they have on their defense and they have on their team in general anyway. But for DeForest Buckner to end up on the Indianapolis Colts with Malik Hooker and Darius Leonard, what are your expectations for that defense going into next season?
Well, I'm with you. I think when you make an eye-opening move, you definitely feel it's a pretty good decision. And the more you strengthen your defense, the less you have to depend on Rivers at his age, having to do it all by himself. So, again, you're talking about another quarterback who threw a lot of interceptions and for the Chargers, and that's the reason why he's out there, So I think you have to make sure that you keep him on the field without a doubt, but he can't put them in tougher situations where they ultimately get worn down. So, yeah, you strengthen your defense in the event of mistakes. But if you notice, Rivers only got a one-year deal of $25 million. Knowing if he wants to stay there, he better be much more effective than he was with the Chargers for sure. So, anytime you can improve your defense, I'm all for it, because everybody knows that defense wins championships.
Well, here's the good news for Phillip Rivers. He's going to have a much better offensive line with the Colts than he did with the Chargers last season. That's the good news for him, and maybe he's not so far over the hill as we may think he is, but his play from last season, that's what we're making our judgment based off of. Now, let's touch on another team that, in my opinion, made some poor judgments this week, and that would be Houston Texans. Early on Monday, we learned that the team acquired David Johnson.
Right.
And then a few minutes later, we found out that David Johnson and a draft pick were headed to Houston in exchange for DeAndre Hopkins. I just don't know what to say about what Bill O'Brien is doing down there with that team.
Well, Bill O'Brien, number one, doesn't think DeAndre Hopkins is worth $20 million a year. That's what he thinks. And again, he is trying to take a page out of Belichick's book, where you don't want to overvalue certain players where you can't bring in reinforcements. Now, plus, when you look at the drama that preceded there about the Aaron Hernandez, I wasn't in the room, so I don't know what took place. But if indeed any comments were made about Aaron Hernandez, I think O'Brien was way out of line. I understand maybe not wanting to go ahead and spend $20 million on a receiver. I don't think too many players are really worth $20 million, much less a wide receiver. But the only problem I have is if you're going to trade DeAndre Hopkins, it's one thing, but at least get a first-round pick out of the thing. The kid's in the prime of his career, and you saw the productivity that he's had on the field. So,
yes, I definitely agree with that because my issue is not the fact that DeAndre Hopkins was traded. My issue is with the fact of what he was traded for.
Right. You and everybody else.
Got more out of that. And to the Arizona Cardinals, I just simply say kudos. And Kyler Murray has a legit number one wide receiver to throw the football to, who is going to be even better going forward because now he gets to learn from one of the greatest wide receivers of all time, being Larry Fitzgerald. So DeAndre Hopkins is already great, and now this could potentially make him even greater, just being able to sit there under Larry Fitzgerald's learning tree. I'm excited to see what Arizona is going to be able to put together going forward. The only thing I see them needing to really work on continually with that offense is you have to improve that offensive line. They still need some pieces there, and I believe that they will get them. I don't expect them to be a contender next year, but they are moving back in the right direction.
Well, let me tell you this. One thing we can't lose sight of, and that Larry Fitzgerald may have just added 1 or 2 more years to his career with a playmaker like DeAndre Hopkins in the fold. Think about that. I mean, this guy's probably refreshed with this decision. Don't underestimate that Larry Fitzgerald, to me, will be one of the few people that actually starts his career in one place and finishes it, because we saw a lot of guys that were long tenured at organizations moving to different spots, but he's been steadfast about wanting to stay there. So, I think he just feels like I just got a jolt of a couple more years because you added arguably one of the most dangerous receivers. And think of the effect that it has on Deshaun Watson. Unless the Texans could snag a playmaker either in the first round or in the second round, because I know this is a deep draft for wide receivers, they better think of something to do to get this kid some weapons, because you just took a real huge hit. I mean, nobody knows what David Johnson has in the arsenal, what he has left. And I know they've been trying to beef up on running backs, but I got to understand what the Houston Texans are thinking. No, I think when they let Jadeveon Clowney go a year ago, they probably that might have been one of O'Brien's better moves, because Jadeveon only lasted a year in Seattle and he's looking for work. So maybe they knew something there, but this move here with Hopkins is a much different animal. It really is.
And speaking of teams that we feel are moving in the right direction, or at least they believe they're moving in the right direction, I believe they could be, but, the Miami Dolphins.
Oh, yeah.
They made some moves earlier this week as well. A lot of them were notable because they signed quite a few number of former Patriots players as well, but I have a lot more of a belief in what Brian Flores is building in Miami than what Matt Patricia is building in Detroit. I don't even think Matt Patricia knows what he's building in Detroit. We see that Brian Flores was at least trying to establish a culture in Miami. Read off some of these names that are now headed to the Miami Dolphins. Emmanuel Ogbah, Kyle Van Noy, Jordan Howard, Landon Roberts, Eric Flowers, Byron Jones. The only one of those signings I'm not so sure about is Eric Flowers. And that's because as a New York Giant, he didn't really give us too much to be hopeful about. But these are key pieces that are going to be a huge part of the fabric of rebuilding the Miami Dolphins into what they hope can become a contender once again one day. And he has some former Patriots players there that can help him do it too. I believe in what he's doing a lot more than what Matt Patricia is doing. And I'm also excited.
That's a no-brainer. Didn't they add Ted Karras also, I believe?
Yes, they did. They added Ted Karras as well. And keep in mind, they also have a slew of draft picks, too.
Oh, yeah. Everybody a year ago thought they were going to go 0-16 tanking for Tua. But don't tell that to the Dolphins and Flores, who knew more than we thought that they did. So there's no comparison when you compare Brian Flores to Matt Patricia. Brian Flores is his own man, is what he is. And he definitely has done a phenomenal job. I'll tell you, the Dolphins, to me, at the rate they're going, they fooled everybody. You know what? They won 5 games with what they had last year. And now, as a result, this team, if I were to make a preliminary prediction for them, you're talking about a team that could win it easily, double that number. I would give them at least 10 because not only are they have a slew of picks like you talked about, but you also have, all these free agents. This rebuild may be 2 years, last year and this year. I keep getting the transcripts from the Dolphins, and I keep nodding my head, holy Toledo. I mean, for the first time in many, many years, this organization's getting it right, and they're getting it fast. Now, do I see them drafting a quarterback in the draft? Oh, I don't think there's any question. But my question is to you, and I'm really curious. Josh Rosen has been in 2 years in a row with difficult situations. I hope he really does get an opportunity somewhere. I really do. Because he's had a bad deal in Arizona, and he's had one in Miami. The only thing he hasn't had is bad weather, but everything else has been very cloudy for him on the career side.
Yeah, there's one destination that sticks out to me in particular where he could possibly end up if he is no longer a Miami Dolphin going into next season. I could definitely see him having a chance to possibly go to New England.
Oh, yeah.
And seeing what Bill Belichick can do with that young man.
Well, first of all, there was.
I don't want to call Josh Rosen a bust.
I won't either.
Bust yet.
Well, first of all, New England was interested in him when he came out of the draft. They were high on him on their draft board. They just never got to pick him up. But I'd love to see. I won't call him a bust. Not yet. Not when you have two rotten situations. No way. No. But I agree with you. New England makes the most sense for Josh, and I hope the kid does get an opportunity.
No. I definitely believe he will get an opportunity as well. And I believe the Dolphins are going to shock some people in the draft with who it is that they draft at quarterback. I don't believe it's going to be Tua Tagovailoa. I believe the entire time that they have their eye on Justin Herbert out of Oregon. That's just what I believe.
Yeah, if he slides that far. If he slides, how good is he? You tell me.
Remains to be seen.
Well, what about Jake Fromm out of Georgia? Georgia quarterbacks fare pretty well in the league, don't they? Matthew Stafford, I don't care how bad the team has been. Matthew Stafford's more than performed to the level of his paycheck. There are some Georgia quarterbacks that do okay, and Jake Fromm seems to be one that's being talked about too. Yeah, I don't know. My question to you is, now that you brought two up, where do you think he's going to wind up, and how far will he drop?
I think he's going to be a Charger.
Do you really?
What I ultimately think. I believe he's going to be a Los Angeles Charger.
That's interesting. Yeah, for some reason, you get Junior Seau. They have all these Samoan guys. Why not bring on Tua as well? And I'm not trying to be discriminatory toward them, but they do tend to take a lot of those players. Manti Te'o was there for a while, wasn't he? Maybe they know something about that origin that I don't know about. I don't know. But, yeah, now that you brought up the Chargers, I could see where he might land there. I don't see him going with the Washington Redskins. But then again, maybe I might be wrong. Dan Snyder might want him anyways. You never know what he's doing. But the only smart thing that Dan Snyder made was that he brought in Ron Rivera. So I'll give Ron the benefit of the doubt, even if Snyder gets nothing but the doubt.
Yes, and I believe that the Redskins will draft Chase Young. I'm not buying into all of the talk about them wanting to take a look at other quarterbacks in the draft and them possibly looking at other veteran quarterbacks that are still available now. There were rumors out there that they may have been interested in Jameis Winston. Those rumors have died as of now. Could they possibly come back up? I don't know. But speaking of Jameis Winston, he will be searching for a new home, and his former team, they have a new quarterback. And, Scott, we spoke about this about 2 weeks ago, and it didn't seem like it was real to me. It seemed like, if anything, if Tom Brady was going to leave New England, he was going to be a Charger. And I felt this way for the past 7 months. And I felt this way even more once I learned about Tom Brady launching 199 studios in L.A. I just felt like at that point, this is a given. He's going to L.A. He's going to Hollywood. He's going to go do the LeBron thing. He's going to go play football, but he's He's also focusing on his life after football. And on Tuesday, what we found out was that was not very much the case. Because up until about 7 p.m. on Tuesday, I was still sold on Brady to the Chargers. On Tuesday morning, we learned officially from Tom Brady himself that he would not be returning to the New England Patriots. That didn't catch me by surprise at all. What are your feelings on that?
I never believed that he would ever be a Charger from the beginning. Number one, Eli Manning wanted no part of him. The Chargers haven't convinced me over the years that they're an organization that's committed to winning because they continue to not pay key people and they let them get away. So, to me, the Chargers, he would have only been good for the Chargers at the gate, but I don't think that he would have had any chance whatsoever to go ahead and be a piece there. Yes, everybody talks about the Hollywood connections. I get it, but no, I don't. Not one bit. And I knew that when you have a carrot called Bruce Arians dangling out there, Bruce Arians, all he's done was work with Ben Roethlisberger, Carson Palmer, and Eli Manning. So I think Brady was smart enough to recognize that. It doesn't hurt in the state of Florida, as we both know since we live here. There's no state income tax. And of course, nothing like beautiful weather. How do you like living in the beautiful weather year-round? I bet you got to like it, right?
Always glorious. It's very pleasant.
Oh, yeah. Well, I guarantee you Brady's next real estate purchase will be in Clearwater Beach. And that ain't a bad place, man, I'll tell you. I mean, the wife will be fine, the kids will be fine, and Tampa's a really good sports town. They really are. The Buccaneers' history over the years has been nothing short of pathetic, but you know what? They do have a Super Bowl to their credit, despite all the futility that's been connected to that organization. No, I never thought the Chargers were ever in play. If anything, if I had to prioritize the order of the teams that I thought they were interested in, I might have put Tennessee near the top because of Mike Vrabel, but that could have been a 1-1A, 1B, and Bruce Arians, without a doubt, Xavier, to me, is a guy that you have all those weapons. They're wide receivers. I think they could probably use an upgrade or two in the running back side because what did they rank, like 24th or 28th in rushing last year in the 20s. So I think the Buccaneers can afford to improve in the running attack, and I'll be curious what moves they make here during free agency now that they have Brady in. But I'll tell you what, and don't lose sight of the big X factor here, X-Man. Okay, Jason Licht, the general manager for the Buccaneers, was with New England when Brady turned pro. So there's a relationship factor there as well. But I want to go back to the Dolphins. You brought them up a little bit. I'm really got to be excited about this organization because, you know, this organization knew that they had a lot of money to work with in the salary cap. So now they're able to go out there and spend it. Hopefully they spend it wisely. But they were laughed at when they traded Minka Fitzpatrick to the Pittsburgh Steelers for draft capital, and that's what they've been doing. You know, I can only imagine how active they're going to be in the draft, and my hope is to cover one day for it, depending on whether or not we can get out of our house with the quarantine thing. Whether I can get down to there. I don't know what the media coverage is going to be in Miami, let alone Jacksonville. So whether you can stay in rooms or not, or whether I'm going to be forced to stay home and monitor it otherwise. So I don't know. The Buccaneers still have a lot of work to do to surround Brady with a complete supporting cast. The wideouts appear to be pretty good. The running game needs a little bit of work, and they need to continue to see that defense grow because I know it did pretty well, you know, toward the latter part of the year.
And they're also going to have to fix up that offensive line.
Oh, yeah.
It's still going to continue to be a major concern of mine. And that was one of the main reasons I didn't feel that Brady would go to Tampa Bay was because of the offensive line. But obviously there's a plan there with Jason Licht and Bruce Arians and now Tom Brady in the fold as well. Now, they're not instantly going to be a Super Bowl contender, but they're going to be must-see TV. They're going to be must-watch, and it's going to be nice to see Raymond James Stadium packed to its capacity once again.
Well, last I heard they sold 7,000 season tickets, and they bumped it by 15%. They raised them, but you know what? Tom Brady's going to pay for part of his contract based on putting fans in the stands, which they've definitely lacked. They haven't been in the playoffs in 12 years. So can you imagine what's going on? They'll have Brady billboards all over the place. And I'll be curious to see if Chris Godwin gives up his number 12 to Brady. You know, you never know. I mean, there's a price to be paid everywhere else, but I don't think Brady cares about the number. Knowing him, he'll probably want a different number and a different for a different team, but we'll find that out soon enough. So.
And yes, now let's speak on Brady's former team, the New England Patriots. And, you know, Tom Brady was not the only person they lost. I mean, Landon Roberts, they lost Ted Karras, they traded away Harmon. When it comes to Bill Belichick, I don't question his football knowledge. I don't question what he does when it comes to building football teams. But it does appear that the Patriots are headed for a rebuilding situation. Because now all the other three remaining teams in that division, they're not the cupcakes that they used to be anymore. The Jets have something special that they're building there. Buffalo would be the favorite in that division for me, and Miami is the sleeper in that division.
Oh, yeah.
Is it possible that the New England Patriots could go from being first to worst in the AFC East next season?
I'm not so sure I'd go that far. I'd still put the Jets fourth in that division, but is it possible they can end up in third place? I think so, depending on who they land at quarterback. I know they're high on Jarrett Stidham, the fourth-round pick out of Auburn. But when you continue to lose a lot of players, and that's what Brady says, you keep taking away my weapons, I'm getting tired of it. And then, you know, it became a personal thing with him and Belichick about who can win well without the other. So I could see them going 8-8. I really do, and I think this is where Bill Belichick is going to find out how good of a coach he is. I mean, it's okay to win. Now, to Bill Belichick's credit, you know, he had Drew Bledsoe as his quarterback when Drew went down. Tom got the job, and as a result, he had 6 rings, and Drew Bledsoe showed a lot of class when he didn't go out there and become a problem child, and he's still in New England Patriots Hall of Fame, so more power to Drew. But we'll find out what Belichick is really made out of. We will. I mean, he'll be, you know, now we'll see where his GM skills really come into play. We will. But I could see third place. I'm not sold on the Jets yet. I'm really not. But I'll tell you, I'm definitely sold on some of the moves that Buffalo's making. I believe they got a good head coach in Sean McDermott. And, of course, the Dolphins, to me, are they're on a racetrack, and they're definitely, to me, passing a few vehicles into turn 2 and then potentially into turn 3. They haven't been relevant since Bill Parcells left, and Tony Sparano was the coach when they got in the playoffs. That's a long time for these people in this part of the country.
Yes, it definitely is, because the last time that took place, the big three of LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh had not even been formed yet. And that happened over a decade ago. So yes, it's definitely been a long time. But speaking of teams, questionable GMs, 2 years ago, Scott, we started to see the Los Angeles Rams start to make a lot of big, splashy moves. And now we're watching the Los Angeles Rams do everything they can to get out of all of those splashy moves they made. Dante Fowler is now an Atlanta Falcon. Todd Gurley was released on yesterday. He's now an Atlanta Falcon. They also released Clay Matthews earlier this week. Brandon Cooks is on the trading block, and they re-signed Andrew Whitworth, who is 38 years old, to a 3-year deal.
Well, what's
going on with this organization?
Well, let me go back for a moment with New England. Okay, and I'll go back to the Rams. After all, these are two teams that were in the Super Bowl just a couple of years ago. Who do you think will be the likely successor to Brady up in New England? Give me your top 3.
I'm going to put Jarrett Stidham at number 1.
Okay.
I will say Andy Dalton at number 2.
Okay.
And the third one is very questionable because it remains to be seen if this will happen or not. But I would actually give either Jacoby Brissett a chance of possibly ending up back in New England, or, depending on what happens in Carolina, I could see a situation where Cam Newton could possibly end up in New England.
All right, I'll give you my top 3. I think, obviously, Jarrett Stidham initially is the guy. The one I'm really strongly leaning toward is Andy Dalton. I think Andy Dalton's a good quarterback. When you're playing with the Bengals, don't hold that against them. They're cheap too. They don't want to spend any money. I don't care about his 0-8, but I think he's a calming influence. He's a smart quarterback. And just put him around a decent supporting cast, and I think Andy Dalton would be good. The only one, I would not put Cam Newton in the discussion. I'm wondering, I could potentially see Jacoby Brissett, but the guy I would be leaning for, would the Patriots be willing to swing at the fences and bring in Jameis Winston? That to me is interesting. Or maybe with
and that would be a wild card.
Well, it is a wild card.
Something like that possibly happening.
Yeah, it's a wild card.
As of right now, I give the edge to Jarrett Stidham because obviously Bill Belichick is very high on him, and we can't judge him based off of just the few amount of reps that we saw him play during last season. We can't judge him based off of that. So if he is the quarterback, we should give him a chance. But I believe the Patriots are headed for something sort of a rebuild anyway. Just
right.
Not because of just losing Brady, but they've lost entirely too many players.
Oh yeah, no doubt about that. Well, I can see Jameis Winston now with the Chargers. After all, they're moving into a new building, and if there's one mishap there, I could see him getting a fresh start there. He could be a gate attraction with the Chargers. I definitely see that as a possibility. But, okay, let's go back to the Rams. I just, those things came to mind. I wanted to address them with you.
Yes, for sure. So what exactly is going on in L.A. with the Rams organization? They look like the glamour child of the NFL that was developing just 2 years ago. And now, although those were a lot of high-paying contracts they were playing out, those were some good players. Now, when it comes to Todd Gurley and Clay Matthews, obviously Clay Matthews was a bargain deal. Todd Gurley got injured. Reports out there that Todd Gurley was not a good locker room guy after his injuries. Wasn't the same player, of course, but he started to affect the chemistry within the locker room. But are they going to suffer some form of a fall from grace from where they were 2 years ago going into next season, in your opinion?
Well, amazingly enough, okay, you're a Georgia kid, right? So yeah. Todd Gurley's going back to his home state playing for the Falcons. I think he could probably perform pretty decent. I really think this is a good opportunity for him to have a good year. And if the Falcons like him enough, they'll keep him. I think that's a great move for Atlanta, to be honest with you. Now, think about it this way, though, Xavier. Jalen Ramsey was acquired by the Rams, as you call a splashy move, right? And he thought this team was pretty close to Super Bowl. He's a difference maker. And the Jacksonville Jaguars I still think are going to make out on that trade because they got a good haul for him in terms of the draft choices that they're going to receive. So not only are they going to have to pay Jalen Ramsey to save their face, and yet you lose Dante Fowler, but you kind of wonder in the back of your mind that with all Matthews, was he at tail end? Probably. But all these moves definitely reflect that I'm not sure what direction the Rams are going in, and they paid Jared Goff an extension as well. So and now Brandon Cooks, as I understand, is on the trading block as well. You can't keep trading away good players. We're seeing a lot of good players to go and expect to compete in this league. But it depends on what every owner and every team is at in any given situation. Do we think we're close? Are we going to have to rebuild? And how quickly do we do it? Because let's face it, there are no guaranteed contracts in the NFL. How many of these guys actually end up seeing all that money that they signed for? So, that to me goes without saying, doesn't it?
It definitely does. I'm interested to see what direction this team goes in. I'm interested to see now, without all of these players in place, who Sean McVay really is as a coach now.
Right.
Because now, the honeymoon period's over.
Right. Well, but I tell you what, though, you have to put a little responsibility on the general manager, too, Xavier. Sean McVay is what he is, but the general manager needs to make sure he's shopping for the right groceries And if he's having any second thoughts, like he apparently has on some of these larger contracts, their financial situation, to me, they have to look at. And what's worse about the whole thing is they, too, like the Chargers, are moving into a new stadium. How are you going to keep it interesting for those people who want to support the Rams? You got two teams moving into a new stadium, and you better make sure that for the amount of money you're charging for those tickets, that the fans are going to get their money's worth. Okay, it might be a honeymoon year, for the new stadium, but full well that L.A. fans have plenty of alternatives for entertainment out there. They went many, many years without football, and they were fine. The NFL needed that market in the worst way, and they got it in the form of two teams. So, to me, both organizations need to figure it out. I actually think the Chargers are a little further ahead than the Rams, even though the Rams got a head start on it, and they made it to a Super Bowl. But it remains to be seen. I mean, I'm more curious about the Chargers than anything else. In fact, when I was out in L.A. in January, I took a virtual tour of that stadium over at their offices, and that place looks pretty impressive. It really does. So, but what will that translate? It's anybody's guess. I don't know. But I think the Chargers, I still think my gut feeling, and I nailed this last night with Rudy Reyes, that Gurley is going to Atlanta. And boy, I texted Rudy today, so I told you, didn't I? And yeah, he responded in a way that, yeah, we got it right. But the thing you have to understand, and obviously, you're a bit younger than I am, which is no disadvantage for you. I've seen so many things throughout the years, and the thing you're learning is you got to follow your instincts, Xavier. If I could give you ever any piece of advice, and I know you've always been receptive to it, follow your instincts no matter what. Your gut feeling tells you something. In the industry, you do it. Can I give you a good example many, many years ago, if you don't mind?
Yes.
Years ago when I was covering the Miami Dolphins in the 80s, I was working for a weekly newspaper, and the general manager, so-called editor, I told him I have a gut feeling about Al Del Greco, a kicker, and he said, why would you even think about doing a kicker? I said, yeah, Danny, I got a gut feeling about this one, and I think we need to do it. I said, well, I'm reluctant. I don't want to do it. I said, hey, listen, Danny, I'm out there at training camp, and I'm looking at things. You're not, so my advice to you is let me write on this kicker. What's the worst going to happen? He doesn't make the team, but then as it turns out, he could be landed somewhere else. Well, how do you think Al Del Greco did in his NFL career? I'm sure you know that he stayed around for, 15, 17 years, right?
Yes.
Well, that was the gut feeling, and that led to many more gut feelings. And I sent this guy a message, and that's the only thing I can stress upon you is if you feel you have a gut feeling on something, don't be afraid to talk about it, because you're seeing something out there that most people can only do when you speculate with numbers, stats, until you have the eyeball test. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to get off subject here, and I hope you don't think that I am. But, a lot of the eyeball tests that you have are one thing. But ultimately, to me, where you end up making out on this whole thing is, if you have a good relationship and you sense something, you got to ride it out. You follow me?
Yes.
And do you notice some of the transactions that have taken place during this free agency frenzy? Are a lot of coaches that had previous relationships with some of the players that they brought in, since you don't have the ability to bring them into your complex and you have to do everything remotely?
Oh, yes, definitely. I've definitely noticed that.
Well, which one stands out to you of those?
Right now, I'm going to say the Washington Redskins.
Okay.
Because it's basically the Carolina Panthers of 2015 and 16 up north right now. Thomas Davis is now a member of that organization. Ron Rivera hired many of his former assistants to come and be a part of the staff there. It is a total. It has a Carolina Panthers culture feel to it right now. Of course, we know that they're in Washington, but you get what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. What about Nick Foles in Chicago? Who was his coach in Kansas City? Guy by the name of Matt Nagy? Yeah. Okay. Well, and you know darn well that the Bears didn't acquire Foles with the intent to back up Trubisky, right? Mitch Trubisky?
Oh, no. Of course not.
Bingo. Okay. People could say whether or not the Foles experiment in Jacksonville was a total failure. I don't agree with that at all. I really don't agree with that assertion. You know, Nick Foles came here with having won a Super Bowl. I mean, yes, did they overpay him a lot to get him to come here? But they thought that they were further along in the process, and then an injury in the first game, and he could never recover. And then you brought in an unheralded quarterback in the 6th round named Gardner Minshew, and that worked out. But I don't think, and I may be one of the few people that actually believes it, that Foles, yes, he did. It wasn't one of the better contracts the Jaguars have dished out. And also, they also are paying $18 million of that deal to the Bears. But, you know, the Jacksonville situation, to me, was a fiasco when he got hurt and Minshew. But their problems were a lot deeper. The culture that Tom Coughlin created began and led to the demise of that organization, which explains why he got fired in the first place.
Yes, it definitely does. And speaking to the demise of organizations, I spoke earlier, ladies and gentlemen, about Cam Newton possibly being up for New England or any other jobs in the NFL, even though it doesn't appear to be the case right now, because the Carolina Panthers, after weeks of hearing Cam Newton and the Carolina Panthers are moving in the right direction, they want to see what Cam Newton can do under new head coach Matt Rule. So we want to see what he can do. And earlier this week, on Monday to be exact, we learned that the Carolina Panthers were giving Cam Newton an opportunity to seek a trade. Now, Cam Newton came out minutes later, and he disputed that report, saying that he never asked for a trade. Well, one day later, Teddy Bridgewater was signed as the quarterback. And you can best believe that Teddy Bridgewater is not going to be the backup quarterback in Carolina. So I'm very happy that Teddy Bridgewater is getting this opportunity. But the Carolina Panthers, they don't give me a lot to be excited about as a whole. Too much after that.
Well,
what are your thoughts?
My thoughts are I think they handled the situation poorly, period. I mean, I understand. I mean, but Cam Newton didn't help himself either with some of his ridiculous press conferences in the past, and his injury history forced his move too. So what do you expect the Panthers to do? Okay, this isn't Jerry Richardson that's running that franchise, Xavier. This is a new owner who brought in his own coach, and they weren't convinced with the medicals that this guy was further along, and they're trying to win. And Tepper's he's trying to bring in, I believe, an MLS team to that town as well, and who knows what he's trying to do with an XFL team, but he's committed to that community to try to put the best product that he can. So I don't think from a PR standpoint the Panthers handled it well. But when you have a new owner and you have a new coach and you're trying to change the direction of that franchise, then you're in a situation where you really have to move on. And Cam Newton didn't give them any reason to go out there and believe otherwise. I mean, again, PR-wise, it wasn't handled well. But you know what? Tepper didn't miss all those games. Neither did Matt Rule. Did they? And the thing about bringing in Teddy Bridgewater, don't lose sight of the fact that Joe Brady was an assistant coach of the New Orleans Saints for 2 years and worked with Bridgewater, let alone the fact that he was at LSU, so he stayed in the state yet another year, so it's not like he didn't see what he did. And Bridgewater made the most of his opportunity substituting for New Orleans when Drew Brees was out. Now, I think Bridgewater would have stayed in New Orleans had Brees not signed that 2-year extension. Then he knew, well, I'm not waiting this long, so it's better to take the starting job when I can get it, and let alone in a division where they're going to see me twice a year. But my only advice to the Panthers is you better have a good backup quarterback in case Bridgewater were to get hurt, and who would you bring in then? So I don't even think they've thought that far ahead, but they better. But I think as a whole, I understand the Panthers' desire to go on, and you know what? Cam Newton did nothing to help himself out, not staying on the field the last couple of years. These guys
I definitely agree with you on that because I believe he still has some game left, but he's not the guy that he was in 2015. He's not the guy that he was becoming in 2018 because those injuries have just piled up. And it appears to be no market for him. Now, eventually, I believe he's going to get his shot to be a quarterback in the NFL again, but it very well may come as a backup. And you talk about a fall from grace. 5 years ago, this was the MVP of the league.
Right.
And now he say the least.
No question. And I predict he'll get paid probably anywhere between $5 and $8 million to be a backup, because that's probably what the backups are going for. But he still should take this as an opportunity to evaluate himself and continue to get better. And I believe he'll land someplace. You never know. I mean, how these things play out. He just has to be patient and get the Carolina thing off his chest and understand that with the amount of players that have played their careers with a lot of teams that moved on. Well, think about that number for a minute, Xavier, all right? Yeah, Tom Brady was the king of them all. Phillip Rivers, Jason Witten left the Cowboys to go to the Raiders. So, and I'm sure there's a lot of other ones that are out there, but those are the three that stand out in the top of my mind. And, of course, Cam Newton will be expected to move on as well. So, I think there's life for Cam in the NFL, but you're right. He's going to have to really get over it, try to get better, and then hopefully the right fit is, because one thing we'll always say about the quarterback position, one bad hit and you're out, and then the next guy comes in, so you better have a good backup. And I think that he'll have another opportunity at some point. But can you blame an organization where the guys missed a lot of games, let alone a new owner at all? No, I don't blame it. Again, I'll reiterate, PR may not have been as good, but unfortunately, Cam, with your idiotic press conferences in the past where you haven't looked good in front of us, the media, but you haven't been able to stay on the field. No, he's not getting any sympathy out of me at all. No way.
No, I definitely agree with that. And before we go, I have two other teams I'd like to address with you, and I understand that we're going over our time.
Oh, it doesn't matter. That's okay. We're right on target.
So I want to speak to you about some moves that we saw the Dallas Cowboys and the Denver Broncos make. The Denver Broncos in particular, this is a team that definitely looks like they're moving back in the right direction as well. I believe that they do have their young quarterback for the future in Drew Lock. Joe Flacco will no longer be a part of those plans. He was released on yesterday after failing a physical. So they signed Melvin Gordon earlier today. They traded for Jarrell Casey, an all-pro, perennial-time Pro Bowl defensive lineman earlier this week. What are just your thoughts about what the Denver Broncos are doing?
Well, I mean, like anything else, they were 7-9 last year. They found a quarterback in Drew Lock. Joe Flacco, to me, hasn't been the same since he won that Super Bowl. So, what can you say? I mean, John Elway has built Super Bowl contenders before. He had struggled at the quarterback position, but I think with Drew Lock, he's going to be okay. I think the Broncos are headed in the right direction. He brings on Pat Shurmur. Fangio brings on Pat Shurmur to try to shore up the offense a little bit. So I wouldn't be so enthusiastic about Jeff Driscoll as the backup quarterback to Drew Lock, but considering his body of work with the Lions was horrible, he got hurt and then was 0-3. Then again, nobody did well with them. So, I just think that the Flacco situation reminds me of Cam Newton. If you're not going to pass the physical and you're not healthy, you're going to be out of a job. But I think...
Yes, and you brought up the Super Bowl that he won with the Baltimore Ravens, and I agree with you. He hasn't been the same quarterback since then, and that's saying a lot because that was so long ago when that took place. So, is this it for Joe Flacco in the NFL?
I don't think so yet. I don't. We'll have to see how the medicals play out. We may not know how anybody's medicals are going to play out, will we? For a while. I mean, how many of these bonuses that are going to be signed will be rescinded, depending on whether or not they're able to go ahead and, have them out. Right now, you've got it there. So I'm not so sure I'll write off Joe too quickly. I'm really not. I have a question for you about Jacksonville, though. What are your thoughts about potentially the Jaguars finding bringing back Blake Bortles as a backup?
It's something that could be possible, especially now that so many of the players who were opposed to him being on the team and being one of the highest paid players, those guys are gone. So it's basically a new environment he's walking into. Same city, same team, same organization, but different faces that he's walking into. And I believe they're building a culture. I do have to
It wasn't
I
bad.
don't expect Doug Marrone to be in Jacksonville after this season.
Me either. Well, yeah, but David Levin seems to think that Doug Marrone and David Caldwell might get a reprieve till 2021 when their contracts are up, because now that this is a rebuild, then how's Shad Khan going to go out there and terminate these guys? Who would want that job anyhow? So I don't know. But to answer your question about Doug Marrone and Blake Bortles, they got along fine. They really did. So I don't think that's an issue at all. It was just a wild idea.
So there's a potential opportunity there they could return.
Yeah, I mean, again, who do you have as a backup quarterback that's worthwhile? Matt Moore is certainly a steady guy. Chad Henne's already re-signed with the Kansas City Chiefs. So the way I look at it is that anything's very possible, isn't it?
It definitely is. And, Scott, I'm going to throw another name at you that could be brought into Jacksonville as a backup, too.
Yeah, go ahead.
And depending on how Gardner Minshew plays, he could possibly become the starter. And you brought his name up earlier, and that would be Jameis Winston.
Yeah.
Because there doesn't appear to be a market for him right now. But I don't believe he is totally a bust just yet. I believe he just needs to get in the right type of situation. I'd like to remind everyone that for a good deal of his tenure in Tampa Bay, his head coach was Dirk Cutter. I don't have to say too much more after that.
No, that's true, but he also went through a lot of other ones. Lovie Smith has done a good job at the University of Illinois. So, Lovie Smith, I have no problem with him. The Tampa Bay Bucks have gone through a lot of coaches since they ended up moving on from John Gruden. They really have. So, again, but you know what? When you brought up Jameis Winston, the Jacksonville Jaguars, I told David Levin that would make a lot of sense to me, and that would be an opportunity for him and a small community to get back on track. So I don't think that one's as far-fetched. The question is how much money will he take, and if he's willing to take enough money where they can afford to pay him, then yeah, what do you got to lose? Plus, he could put people in the stands if Gardner Minshew were to get hurt. So I'm totally on board with you there. Again, it's all about bear in mind, whether you know it or not, the Jacksonville Jaguars only have 6 home games during the regular season. The other 2 are going to London.
Yes, and the NFL is doing more of that. So I'm paying attention to what's going on with that franchise in particular, because when you start having your home games removed and placed in many different places, that could be a prelude to something else bigger even happening. But, back to the Jameis Winston point there, despite whatever happened in Tampa Bay, he's always going to be a hero in Florida anyway, for the national championship that he won with Florida State.
True, but the only reason why Jacksonville will never go anywhere, I could see them with 2 games out in London, because they make a lot of money for those games, and Shad Khan is pretty well versed in that area. So I don't think it'll never. There's no problems there. I just think that the NFL likes when they do play there, because at least they're willing to do it. And if they play their 2 games this year, they'll be 2 in a row. But sometimes the smaller markets have to get creative to try to be in the black and not the red. So I wouldn't read any more into that. That's been a pretty good situation for the Jaguars. Again, I'm closer to the situation, so I can probably be able to assess that a little bit more. But again, what you were talking about, NFL stuff. That's all. The only news we've had going on in the sports world all week. Otherwise, everything else has been pretty idle. And I'm glad that when we talked about what we were going to do tonight, that the sole focus was on this, because that's all there really is. So, and there's a lot of things for us to talk about on this edition of The Real and the Rare.
There definitely is. And the last team that I want to speak to you about, I normally wouldn't even address them, but I'm going to address them tonight.
Sure.
And that would be the Dallas Cowboys. We saw them make some moves earlier this week. Obviously, beginning the week with tagging Dak Prescott. Amari Cooper was re-signed to a 5-year contract earlier in the week. They added Gerald McCoy. I actually like that move. And they also added HaHa Clinton-Dix. I'm just a little skeptical on that one, because HaHa Clinton-Dix is not the same player now that he was in the first center.
Oh, did they add him? I know he played for Mike McCarthy, so if he did, that's a McCarthy move. And I was happy about the Amari Cooper. He wanted to really play in Dallas along with Dak Prescott. So I'm really happy that Amari Cooper is happy that he decided to play in Big D because he's comfortable there. He's happy. And Jerry paid him what he felt. It was a fair deal for both sides, without a doubt. So I didn't know about the Ha-Ha Clinton Dix. Thanks for letting me know about that.
Yes, and, with these moves, I see Dallas now being the favorite in the NFC East for the time being. This was a rather quiet free agency period for that division, outside of the Philadelphia Eagles acquiring Darius Slay on yesterday. We didn't really see major moves take place in the NFC East amongst other teams. So these are some quiet moves that I believe could ultimately be some big moves, because we talked earlier about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the dysfunction that they've had there for the past decade. One of the bright spots in all of that was Gerald McCoy. And I believe he still has a lot of football left in him. And this is a guy who went to college at the University of Oklahoma, so he's very familiar with that area of the country where he's headed now. And I believe he could be a great leader for that locker room, but I believe he adds some juice to that defense.
All right, you talked about Darius Slay. Let me give you a little insight in that situation. First of all, you and I both talked earlier in the program that we don't like Matt Patricia. And when I read some of the comments that Slay made about Patricia, I liked him even less. Darius Slay is one of your better players. You don't treat him with a fair amount of respect. And you know what? I don't think with Patricia, I thought it was a horrible hire from the beginning. And do I sometimes side with the player? Yeah, in some cases I don't. But I'm 100% Slay on this one. I really am. And think about the return, though, Xavier. Here's a player that has been to the Pro Bowl a few times, and the Lions can only net a third and a fifth-round pick. But let's not lose something out. Another thing, Darius Slay got picked when Jim Schwartz was the Lions head coach, and who was the defensive coordinator in Philadelphia? Jim Schwartz. Right, and I'll go out on a limb with this one too, Xavier. Jim Schwartz, to me, I think does deserve a second head coaching opportunity. I really do, and I'll say that till I can't talk anymore. I really believe that. I hope he gets it. But Jim Schwartz, to me, it recognizes what a player he is, and I think I wish Darius Slay nothing but the best. I really do. But, again, Matt Patricia's inability to communicate, and his record speaks for itself. All you have to do is go ahead and look at it. What is he, 9-22-1? I think that's what it is.
Oh, yeah, it's atrocious.
Yeah, it's horrible. And he was a downgrade, as it turns out, from Jim Caldwell, which I think was stupid in the first place. But that's for another day.
We understand the only reason Matt Patricia ended up with the job anyway. Well, it's two reasons there, of course. One is because Bob Quinn was there and he was a part of the New England Patriots organization. Two is because Matt Patricia had some glory with the New England Patriots as their defensive coordinator, even though I believe that was Belichick running the show the entire time anyway. And when this is all over, because it will be over after this season, I don't have high expectations for him. As a matter of fact, there were also rumors that came out a few weeks ago that Matt Stafford also wanted out of the organization. So that just goes to tell you how bad the situation really is there with him. When this ends after this season is over, he more than likely will not get another gig as a head coach in the league again. Or, who knows? We don't know.
Well, geez. If Jim Caldwell didn't get one, and he's the first full-time coach since Joe Schmidt to have a winning record, the Lions, when they go through coaches, they generally don't go ahead and get hired again. I'm not talking about part-time guys. I'm just talking about full-time guys. So if Jim Caldwell didn't get a job, Matthew Stafford, I love him as a quarterback. I really do. The best quarterback there since Bobby Lane, Xavier. Okay, best. And I love Stafford. I love the arm angles that he throws. He's taking a beating over there. But he played a lot of games in a row until he finally ended up going down with a back injury. So I think, to me, Matt Patricia, came in with high expectations of being a good defensive coach. And tell me how that went. Not very good. So, but Matthew Stafford, I don't know, of all the quarterbacks in the league, I would put him in my top 3 or 4 all day long. I don't care. I mean, we know about Patrick Mahomes. We know about Aaron Rodgers. We know about Tom Brady. But Matthew Stafford, to me, is a very underrated quarterback. It's just too bad he's with an organization that hasn't been able to figure it out by surrounding him with the right pieces, let alone the fact there hasn't been a consistent running game anyway. So, but glad you brought that up. Thanks for bringing up Darius Slay.
Oh, yes, of course, because that's a huge move for the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm not saying that it's not. He's the cornerback that they've been needing to get for that secondary for so long, and he doesn't come with the baggage that would have came with someone like a Jalen Ramsey.
Right. That's true.
Remember, we thought that potentially Jalen Ramsey could have possibly been heading to Philadelphia when he was looking to get his way out of Jacksonville last year. So I believe that's going to be a big move for them. It remains to be seen what's going to happen with the Dallas Cowboys without Byron Jones out at cornerback this year. But I really like the moves of Gerald McCoy and HaHa Clinton-Dix for a defense that was somewhat of a disappointment this past season. I believe those are two guys, especially HaHa Clinton-Dix being a part of the Mike McCarthy Green Bay Packer culture before that came to an end, and Gerald McCoy being a well-seasoned veteran. I believe that's going to just add some much-needed juice to that locker room.
Well, Mike McCarthy is going to bring in his own people. So my question to you is, how do you think the Cowboys are going to do, and how do you think Mike McCarthy is going to do in Dallas? He's probably one of the most high-profile coaches the Cowboys have brought in for a while.
I believe that they will win the NFC East
next
year. I don't trust the Philadelphia Eagles wide receiver situation right now.
Okay.
I believe the Dallas Cowboys have better weapons. Of course, they have a better running back. I don't believe that Dak Prescott is a better quarterback than Carson Wentz, but he's going to be placed in a position right now in the short term to be more successful. And as I said, I'm just really excited to see what Gerald McCoy is going to bring to that defense, as well as HaHa Clinton-Dix. So I believe the Dallas Cowboys will go somewhere between 10-6 or 11-5 next year, and they'll win the NFC East. And they could potentially possibly play in the NFC Championship. I'm not so sure I'm willing to go that far yet, because I want to see what's going to happen with the NFL draft.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think 10-6, 11-5 gets them in the playoffs. I'd be curious to see if the additions are better than the subtractions, and I think. But the one thing you can always say that Mike McCarthy's a heck of a coach. He's won a Super Bowl, and Jerry Jones will respect him more than he has Jason Garrett, because Mike McCarthy said, "Jerry, this is my show," and Jerry Jones, to me, hasn't been relevant since Jimmy Johnson left. Forget about Barry Switzer getting his free piece of jewelry via Jimmy Johnson. So now he's got a coach in there that's a no-nonsense individual. Jerry worked okay with Bill Parcells, but now he's got Mike McCarthy, and Mike McCarthy has a Super Bowl ring, and that's something Jerry wants as he gets older. So, in future shows we'll talk about Dak Prescott. I don't care to get into it tonight. So, that situation will ultimately work itself out. We don't know enough about his numbers, but we've covered a lot of grounds. But I think that McCarthy coaching hire was probably one of the best during the offseason without a doubt. And I think the Cowboys fans can look forward to a good, steady brand of football. I'll be curious to see what other players come from Lambeau Field over to AT&T Stadium. But that's something we'll track as time goes on. So, anything else you want to add, Xavier?
Well, no, and I'd just like to close the show out simply how we open it up. Just, hopefully in this past hour and a half, Scott and I have been able to bring some relief to a very complicated and unpredictable reality that we are all living globally right now. Ladies and gentlemen, please listen to your local health officials. Keep washing your hands. Stay at home. Keep practicing social distancing. And, eventually we're all going to get through this together. It's going to take a little time, but we're going to get through this together because, always remember that tough times don't last, but tough people do.
All right, Xavier, I want to let everybody, you have an opportunity to let everybody know how they can go ahead and get a hold of you through Twitter and all your social media. This is your opportunity to let it out there.
Yes, on Twitter you can find me at XTMCKNIGHII. The I's are capitalized. Once again, that's XTMCKNIGHII. On Twitter, you can find me on Instagram at XMCKNIGH22. find me. Simply just ask Xavier McKnight. And if you'd also like to reach out to me on LinkedIn, you can also find me on LinkedIn as Xavier McKnight.
Very good. Okay, and Xavier Knight, folks, is my adopted son, and I'm proud of it. So meanwhile, you can reach myself on Twitter. I have two accounts. One is Scoop, SCOOP, and 33333, as in 5 of them. If you understand poker, I have a 5 of a kind of 3s, and the other one is at Tribune South on Twitter as well. You can also find South Florida Tribune, www.southfloridatribune.com. You can also reach me, Scott Morgenroth, on LinkedIn as well, and we have an Instagram account under South Florida Tribune. So, meanwhile, Xavier, great job tonight. I know you did your homework very heavily, and we love having you on a couple times a month. And if you're ever open to an expanded role on the network, we'll talk about it, because I have some really good ideas that will help you be able to diversify even more. So we'll talk about that shortly. But meanwhile, folks, you're listening to coverage of the Real and the Rare. Once again, my name is Scott Morgenroth, the Motor City Madmouth, along with Xavier McKnight. Anything else you want to add, Big X?
Just once again, everyone, stay safe, stay clean, and just remember that we're going to get through this.
Yeah, we will. So God bless everybody. Stay safe, and look forward to having you on the next edition of The Real and the Rare. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.